Sunday night, and we are studying prophecy. And I'm going to try to spend some time. We've been talking about the 70 weeks of Daniel, and we went through Revelation, and I'm not fully finished with that. But I'm going to try to spend some time and kind of reveal to you what's going on in the Middle East and what this is all about. And we know what it's about here. But this thing is so complicated, people don't even have any idea what it's about. Now, of course, we know that Israel was Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and they were in Egypt for 400 years. Then Moses comes and leads them out of Egypt. God sends Moses. Before the 400 years was the age of the patriarchs. There are 4 patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. These are considered the 4 patriarchs of the ancient world. And then, of course, Joseph is sold over into Egypt. And then when he's in Egypt, he begins to prosper and becomes second in Egypt to Pharaoh. And then he dies. And a new Pharaoh rises up that doesn't know Joseph. And Israel, as they always do, they multiply, and they're just multiplying all over Egypt. And the new Pharaoh says, these Hebrew children are going to take over Egypt. We've got to do something about this. So he began to say, he said, we've got to kill all of the male children that are born, and at least for some period of time. So they begin to kill the males. And of course, you know the story of Moses there in the 2nd chapter of Exodus, how that his mother heard that they were going to kill all the male children, and Moses is going to be the deliverer. So he is saved by his mother giving him to Miriam, his sister, and she goes and puts him in the river, in the flags, or in the those stalks that stand up out in the river, and the reeds of the river, and takes him down the river. And she watches him until the princess of the Pharaoh finds him and takes him in, and he becomes a part of Pharaoh's household. And then, of course, later on, he finds one of his people being beat by an Egyptian, and he kills the Egyptian, and then he flees to the land of Goshen, running for his life. And then, of course, he is the deliverer starting in the book of Exodus all the way through the book of Deuteronomy. And that's the time period of Moses. And Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy. That's the Pentateuch, or the Torah. And then, of course, we know the story how that they come back to the land that had been given to Abraham. And when they come back to the land, God tells them, you have to be obedient to me. If you're not obedient, I will send these judgments: sword, famine, pestilence, and the beast. And then I'll scatter you with the beast, which is Babylon. The Assyrian Empire first, then Babylon. And then, of course, northern Israel was scattered by Assyria. Southern Judah scattered by Babylon. And they stay scattered all over the earth until the end of time. They're scattered everywhere throughout the world. And then when they come back, and of course this morning we said that Solomon was he was the master of the demons according to the Jews, and the Arabs said he was master of the genies. The genies and demons are the same thing. They're a man's imagination. There's no such thing as genies and demons. Well, Solomon, his sin of allowing his wives, as this is kind of a continuation of this morning to a degree, he allowed his wives, 700 of them, 300 concubines, to keep all of their idol gods. And these were the demons, or demon deities of the ancient world: Hercules and Venus and Tammuz and Adonis and Attis, and the list goes on and on. Diana of the Ephesians and so forth. And these were the tree and sun gods. Well, due to Solomon's apostasy, God split the kingdom. into two nations. Well, they were carried away individually as two nations. Northern Israel was carried away in 586 BC. Northern Israel is Israel, and southern Israel is Judah, or the southern tribe of Judah, and later on was joined by Benjamin. Well, they were scattered all over the earth. And God measured out 70 weeks, due to the fact that Israel, for 490 years, never kept their sabbatical years. And they had a sabbatical year every 7 years. And they did not keep these sabbatical years. And that was a part of the covenant of God. So God said, I'll scatter you until I fulfill these 70 weeks at the end of time. And the whole idea of prophecy is God scattering Israel and bringing them back into one nation. Well, we know this happened May 14th, 1948. They became one nation for the first time in 2,600 years. This sign means the end of time is a short way down the road. That's what it means. It's very simple. Then Luke 21:24 says that they, speaking of the Jews, shall fall by the edge of the sword. Well, southern Judah began to fall in 586 BC. Northern Israel, they fell in 722 BC. Did I put 586 up there? I didn't mean to. Northern Israel fell in 722 by the Assyrians, and God has kept them scattered throughout the world until this date here, and it's all because of their apostasy. Now, what's going on in the Middle East is very, very complex. The politics are complex. Everyone wants to blame George Bush. This ain't got nothing to do with George Bush, and it hadn't done anything to do with Bill Clinton. It doesn't have anything to do with Ronald Reagan or George Bush Sr. or Jimmy Carter or John Kennedy or Richard Nixon or Dwight D. Eisenhower or Franklin Delano Roosevelt or any of the rest of the guys. It has to do with the judgment of God. And what's going on over there, the nuclear problem, the nuclear power over there, that is the problem. As Jimmy Carter used to say, nuclear. That's the way he said, nuclear. The nuclear problem or nuclear power, that is the problem. And as I said this morning, I'm kind of setting this up, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to share with you some of the things out of some of the books that I read about the Middle East. Of course, Israel was scattered. Luke 21:24 says they'll be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentile rule is fulfilled over Israel. And the rule was finished May 14th, 1948. And what is very important is the 6-day war in June of 1967, the 5th through the 10th of June, 1967. That's called the 6-day war, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. 6 days that war lasted. And that is where Israel took back Jerusalem. Israel took it back for the first time since Nebuchadnezzar scattered them. And this verse, Luke 21:24, is directly connected with the 6-day war. Because, let me say this slow, the Jews will fall by the edge of the sword. They'll be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. Until. What that's doing is that putting a time period on Jerusalem ceasing to be trodden down of the Gentiles. When southern Judah was carried captive in 586 BC, Jerusalem has been a stomping ground for every army and every empire that's had some axe to grind with Israel all that time. And Israel has been a highway from north to south down to Egypt. It is a highway. The only way you can get to Egypt in the ancient world, you can't go through a desert here, you'd die. You can't go through the Arabian desert. The only way you can get there is if you're up here in Syria, or you're up here over here in Babylon, which is Iraq, or Persia. You have to come over here, and you got to go down that seaboard of Israel, and you have, if you're going to Egypt, and Egypt was a world power, so anytime someone's going to come and conquer Egypt, where did they have to trod their feet? The armies had to march through Israel and come right down through Jerusalem and just tread them underfoot. Well, that's not happening now. No one is powerful enough in the Middle East to walk into northern Israel or come from Egypt and come up through there. That's what all of these wars have been about that they've had. It's been the fact that they are a nuclear force in the world now. Now, when people want to come up and say, well, there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that's not even the point. You can believe this. George Bush did not make that decision on his own. Impossible. He is briefed every morning by the CIA and by Homeland Security, and he's briefed by the FBI every morning. Now, this past week there was a thing in the news about Sarah Palin, what Katie Couric said, what magazines do you read? You know, and I thought it was kind of a stupid question because they're not, the only what they were saying is, you're the bimbo governor from Alaska. Do you read anything? Do you read anything but comic books? You know, you can't run Alaska without reading something, you stupid jerks. And I'm not trying to take, I just think that's one of the dumb things they ask her. If I was her, I'd say, well, have you asked Joe Biden what books he reads or Obama what books he reads? Because you don't go around asking people, what books and magazines do you read? Well, Katie, let me tell you what books I read. Maybe you need to read. What she was saying, if you read books and read the right newspapers, you get information. That's what I keep telling y'all. If you read the right books, you can get the information. This stuff is not secret. You can buy this stuff at Books A Million. You can buy it down here at Barnes and Noble. And you can go into the political section and go in there and look. Now, Katie, I'll tell you what I read, okay? And these are books not written by a bunch of two-bit, off-the-wall writers. These are books, I brought some just to show you. These are books written by scholarly men. Some of them are investigative reporters. Some of them are professors, have doctorates, PhDs. They've researched for years. They put their life on the line. Here's one on Hamas. And this is the kind of stuff I read, Katie. Maybe you ought to read these. You'd know what's going on over there. This is on Hamas, politics, charity, and terrorism in the service of jihad. Hamas is the terrorist group that is in Palestine. Of course, the Palestinians occupy the Gaza Strip and the West Bank of the Jordan River. This is where that they were placed in 1940, as I said, in 1948. 1948, when Israel became a nation, from 1517 until 1948, up to 1917, they were liberated. Palestine was liberated from 400 years of misrule by the Turks, by the Ottoman Turks. In 1917, that's 400 years there. And then from 1917 to 1948, there you got 31 years. 31 years there, that's when the Balfour Declaration expired and they were declared a nation for the first time. And the majority of the people in Israel or in Palestine, about 93% of the people were Palestinian Arabs. And they feel that their land was stolen from them. And how do I know that? I got a handful of books. That's why. If you read the right stuff. Well, they believe the land was stolen from them. The Bible says the land belongs to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I said that this morning. Jacob's name is changed to Israel. That's in Genesis 17. And Genesis 28 and Genesis 32, Jacob's name is changed to Israel. Well, here's the whole thing. All these Arab nations are going to attack Israel because they took the Palestinian Arabs' land away from them. And you can learn that through these books. And every one of these nations has their own terrorist organization. And they're not just terrorists. They're not just a bunch of off-the-wall rebels and gangsters. They are gangsters, but they have armies. They're trained. Even Hezbollah I've got a book here. Hamas is the organization among the Palestinians that goes in. When you see on the news and you see that a bombing has taken place in Jerusalem or somewhere in Israel, it's always somebody out of the Gaza Strip, which is where the Palestinians were told to move in 1948, even though over 90% of them owned the land for over 400 years. They were told, we got 2 internment camps for you, one in the Gaza Strip, one over here in the West Bank, and you have to move to one or the other, and I'm sure they delegated who moved where. Well, among the Palestinians, Hamas is there. That is the educated army of the Palestinians, and they're the ones that have these training schools to show these people how to operate these bombs, even children, to strap them to their bodies so they could go in and blow up Israelis. And of course, the Israelis, they have got terrorist people, not state-sponsored, but they got terrorist people to do the same thing. Well, that's where the suicide bombers come from. That's right. And this is all about Israel having the land given to them in 1948. That's what it's about. And the Palestinian Arabs say our land was stolen from us because we owned it over 400 years. Well, here's Jihad, the political trail of political Islam. I just brought a few of my books to show you things I read at. I can't even read them all because it takes a long time to go through these. And then I've got Lightning Out of Lebanon by Tom Diaz and Barbara Newman. And most of these people are either scientists or they are investigative journalists or they're professors. And this is about Hezbollah, terrorists on American soil. They're already here. Now, Hezbollah is not merely a terrorist organization in Lebanon. It is. And they attack Israel all the time. Most people don't really know what this is about, do they? You see it on the news and don't know what's going on. Well, they're all fighting for the Palestinian Arabs' right to the land because they say it was taken away from them and it belonged to them. Well, this will tell you that in America, Hezbollah, which is now they build hospitals, they take care of the poor, they have all kinds of money-making organizations and schemes. You're going to be hard put to get Lebanon to give up the leaders of Hezbollah. These are the heroes of that part of the world, of the Lebanese people, or which used to be Tyre and Sidon in the ancient world. So when you go and read this stuff, and I could read about who these people are. I won't go into it. It shows you pictures of them in here. And some of them put their lives on the line to write these books. Now, I've got this one, American Jihad by Stephen Emerson. You see him often on MSNBC and NBC. You see I've marked his book up a lot. He did a film called American Jihad. And when he did the film, he did a lot of investigative reporting. And he even broke into houses where they were supposed to be having meetings of jihadists, which means holy war. It's a holy war. And he was going undercover and actually going into some of the Arab apartments and getting information and getting out with his life. And when he put out this book, when he put out the movie, American Jihad, the Arabs put a price on his life. And his life was not worth a nickel for some time. And you see him once in a while. His name is Stephen Emerson. He's the guy that talks about that he would, out in Oklahoma City and up in Kansas City, you can go to the the big meeting places like the Colosseums, and they'd be having meetings of Hezbollah, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda and Taliban would come and meet. They couldn't get together in the Middle East. They couldn't get together over there, but they used our freedom of speech and our Constitution to bring them together in America. Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and Taliban over in Afghanistan. And each one of these nations has got their own form of their terrorist, and they're all fighting for... What's amazing, this is so complicated. These guys that's running for president, they're not going to fix this. The Bible says there will be distress of nations with perplexity. Y'all know the word, it's aporia. It means with no answer. This is not one man doing this. There has been so much concern about the entire Middle East and all of the Arab nations wanting nuclear power. The information that George Bush got came through the CIA. I've got a book called, I wish I'd brought it. It's about all of the secret listening devices throughout the world and the way they've got these underground ways of getting information through all of their contacts. And it's called chatter. And they're listening to chatter all the time. And all of the chatter is so complicated when you start reading these books. Katie Couric, you need to read some of this stuff. I don't hear any of these guys even commenting on this kind of stuff. And a lot of these are professors. They are brilliant men. Some of this stuff will scare the life out of you. In fact, Steve Emerson said he went into one of these meetings like at Kansas City or Oklahoma City, and he got one of the Arabs to take him in. You had to... And they're in there saying, down with America, kill Americans, down with Israel, just screaming and shouting. And it's because we got freedom of speech and you can do that. And he said, they're roaring. And he said, man, I was sitting there frightened and I was in disguise trying not to be seen. And he went in and put his life in jeopardy just to get some information and see it happening. Here's a book on Inside the CIA. Ronald Kessler. I was in the CIA for years. Man, he will reveal to you what's going on. This thing is so complicated, you cannot imagine how complex it is. Here, I've got other books. Here's The Secret History of the FBI. When you go into this and you see the complexities of it all, this is something America knows nothing about. And then I've got a book here called Taliban. It'll go into the history of the Taliban, tell you about this organization, what they do. What I'm trying to do is just share with you. I just wanted to bring some of my books. Now, this is what I read, Katie Couric. Maybe you need to read some of these instead of your comic books. You know, I don't care if she asked Sarah Palin that question, but I thought it was the only reason I believe she asked it was to say, what are you, the bimbo governor from Alaska, and you don't read anything intelligent? What do you read? What newspapers? You don't ask. They never ask anybody else, and that's been the big thing in the news. Y'all seen that, haven't you? Huh? Just kind of stupid. I would have said, well, I read Marvel comics, Superman, and the funny papers, and what else do you want me to say? I mean, that's probably why she didn't answer the question. Because she can't afford to say, I think you asked me that because you're trying to call me a dummy. But the point that Katie Couric was getting at was what you read is how you're educated. We have the information if you want to learn. When I say these things, I'm not saying these things off the top of my head. Now, I've read some out of this. Probably one of the most respected of all these writers is Walid Phares, Future Jihad. He tells you the plans that the Arabs have for America and Great Britain. He tells you the plans that they have for the world and how that they're planning a jihad against the world and they're planning to take over the world. That's their whole... They're doing something that Adolf Hitler was an amateur at. He tried to do it with uniforms. They're saying we do it undercover and everything is secret. And they got a lot more people. There's over a billion Arabs. And 15% of them are ready to go to war with America. That's 150 million. That's half of our population that they've got as an army. Now I'm going to read something to you out of this. This is Osama's revenge. I read something to you before out of it. This is written by Paul Williams, Ph.D., is a journalist and author of The Vatican Exposed, Money, Murder, and the Mafia, among other books, and he has served as a consultant for the FBI. He was also editor and publisher of Metro in Scranton, Pennsylvania, as well as an adjunct professor of humanities at the University of Scranton. I'm not saying being a professor is going to make you brilliant. These guys are not dummies, though. This is all researched information. And a lot of times when I'm teaching on predestination, I'll read stuff to you out of some of the Puritan books like Thomas Watson and Jonathan Edwards and John Bunyan. Well, let me read to you about some things that, the reason I'm saying the things I'm saying about the end of time. Now, I don't even know quite where to start here. I've got some chapters underlined. Let me read a little off the first page. A Letter to America by Osama bin Laden. This is from Osama. Some American writers have published articles under the title, "On What Basis Are We Fighting?" These articles have generated a number of responses, some of which adhered to the truth and were based on Islamic law, and others that were not. Here we want to outline the truth as an explanation and warning, hoping for Allah's reward, seeking success and support from Him or from Allah. While seeking Allah's help, we form our reply on two questions directed at Americans. Why are we fighting and opposing you Americans? What are we calling you to, and what do we want from you? As for the first question, this is Osama bin Laden. Why are we fighting and opposing you? The answer is very simple: because you attacked us and continue to attack us. You attacked us in Palestine, and of course you have to understand something. When you read these informative books, these men will tell you that the Islamic people are taught to lie for any means to an end. They will say anything to get to an end. And they won't tell you the whole truth. They'll tell you the part of the truth of why they're attacking us. And they are attacking us because we are over there and because we're polluting their lands with our Western ways, and we got military bases in Arabia. See, this is what's funny. Arabia and Pakistan are supposed to be our allies. But they're not. Because they got their own form. They have an intellectual type. Saudi Arabia's got an intellectual type of jihad, and it is in the form of, they put oil monies into our colleges and universities, and you can get that out of these books. They put oil money into our universities, and they get to dictate what's written in the books about the Middle East, and they write out of the books, they battlerize or take out everything in the books about what the truth is about jihad and al-Fatah and the rest of this in the Middle East. Now, all of this is about the Bible. It's about Israel falling by the sword. This is about the end of time, and there is no answer. To blame any president and say any president can mess things up this much, that is laughable. This thing has been messed up for centuries. It has nothing to do with a president. It has to do with a policy of making Israel a nation in 1948. That's what it has to do with. It has to do with the Muslim desire to convert the world to Islam. He says, you attacked us in Palestine, which has sunk under military occupation for more than 80 years. The British handed over Palestine with your help and your support to the Jews. I'm just going to read some things through here. The creation and continuation of Israel is one of the greatest crimes, and you are the leader of its criminals. This is the letter from bin Laden to America. And of course, there is no need to explain and prove the degree of American support for Israel. The creation of Israel is a crime that must be erased. Erased. Not a government for the Palestinian Arabs. Each and every person whose hands have become polluted in the contribution towards this crime must pay its price and pay it heavily. It brings us both laughter and tears to see that you have not yet tired of repeating your fabricated lies that the Jews have a historical right to Palestine. Not a historical right, a biblical right. And he says that, see, he's not going to use the word biblical. As it was promised to them in the Torah. Anyone who disputes with you or them on this alleged fact is accused of anti-Semitism. That's funny, isn't it? That was what it would be. This is one of the most fallacious, widely circulated fabrications in history. The people of Palestine are pure Arabs. That's right. He got that right. And original Semites. No, but they are pure Arabs. Most of them, over 90%, were Arabs until 1948. It is the Muslims who are the inheritors of Moses, peace be unto him, and the inheritors of the real Torah that has not been changed. Now, the Quran says that the descendants of Ishmael inherited, and Esau inherited that land. But the Bible says it was Isaac and Jacob. Both of them can't be right, and you can't have both of them be in a holy book. Muslims believe in all the prophets, including Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon them all. If the followers of Moses have been promised a right to Palestine, then the Muslims are the most worthy nation of this. You attacked us in Somalia. You supported the Russian atrocities against us in Chechnya, the Indian opposition against us in Kashmir, the Jewish aggression against us in Lebanon under your supervision, consent, and orders. The governments of these countries attack us on a daily basis. You steal our wealth and oil at paltry prices because of your international influence and military threats. This theft is indeed the biggest theft ever witnessed by mankind in the history of the world. Now, he's not just talking about the oil, he's talking about the land too. Your forces occupy our countries. You spread your military bases throughout them. You corrupt our lands. You besiege our sanctities to protect the security of the Jews, to ensure the continuity of your pillage of our treasures. Now, do you think that we'll stop backing Israel? The only way that it's not pulling out over there that's going to help. It's not going to help anything. It's only our ceasing to back Israel and helping them to dethrone Israel and cast Israel out and make Israel a bunch of gypsies, or throw them into the Mediterranean Sea and kill all of them. Then the Muslims will like us. You have starved the Muslims of Iraq. He says, where the children die every day, it is a wonder that more than 1.5 million Iraqi children have died as a result of your sanctions. You did not show concern. Yet when 3,000 of your people died, the entire world rises and has not yet sat down talking about 9/11. You have supported the Jews in their idea. Oh, by the way, the title of this book is Osama's Revenge, the next 9/11, what the media and the government have not told you and won't tell you. You have supported the Jews in their idea that Jerusalem is their eternal capital. You have agreed to move your embassy there. With your help and under your protection, the Israelis are planning to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque. It is commanded by our religion and intellect that the oppressed have a right to return the aggression. Do not await anything from us except jihad, resistance, and revenge. They have full intention of coming to America. Now, Osama bin Laden is not the only danger. He's just the man in the front right now. He's an old man, getting to be old. He's training many men behind him. And that's just his organization. That's not the rest of them. Is it in any way rational to expect that after America has attacked us for more than half a century, that we will then leave her to live in security and peace? He said, we ain't going to leave you alone. He said, we're not backing off no matter what you do. All through this book, he says, we're not stopping. We're coming to you. We're going to bring it to you, as they say. You may dispute that all of the above does not justify aggression against civilians for crimes they did not commit and offenses in which they did not partake. This argument contradicts your continuous repetition that America is the land of freedom and its leaders in this world. For this reason, the American people are the ones who chose their government by way of their own free will. Well, that's not true, is it? A choice that stems from their agreement to its policies. We don't believe in free will. Thus, the American people have chosen, consented to, and affirmed their support for Israeli oppression of the Palestinians. That's the taking away of the land. The occupation and usurpation of Palestinian lands. We have usurped Palestinian lands. They believe all of Israel belongs to the Palestinian Arabs. And the continuous killing, torture, punishment, and expulsion of the Palestinian people. They have the expulsion of the Palestinian people. They're talking about 1948, putting them in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The American people have the ability and choice to reject the policies of their government and even to change it if they want. And he goes on and on. The American people remain the ones who fund the attacks against us, and they are the ones to oversee the expenditure of the monies in the way they wish through their elected candidates. The American people are the ones who employ both their men and women in the American forces that attack us. Allah the Almighty legislated the permission and the option to take revenge. Thus, if we are attacked, then we have the right to attack back. If they steal our wealth, then we have the right to destroy their economy. When they kill our civilians, then we have a right to kill theirs. And they have full intentions of coming back. He talks about there'll be no treaty. He goes through all this and he says, let me bring out a couple of things here. He says, one of the things to which we call you is, what he's telling us what we have to do. It is to this religion of Islam that we call you, the seal of all the previous religions. It is the religion of showing kindness to others. That's what Islam is. Yeah. About like the American Christianity, isn't it? It is the religion of jihad in the way of Allah, that Allah's word and religious reign, and the religion reigns supreme. It is the religion of unity and agreement on the obeisance to Allah and total equality between all people without regarding their color, sex, or language. Well, they do regard sex, don't they? Females are fourth-rate citizens. Allah has challenged anyone to bring forth a book like the Koran or even 10 verses like it. Oh, well, we don't want one like it. The second thing to which we call you is a demand to stop your oppression, lies, immorality, and debauchery, to reject the immoral acts of fornication, homosexuality, intoxicants, gambling, and trading with interest. Well, I agree with him there, don't you? Huh? That you may be freed from the deceptive lies that you are a great nation. Well, I agree with him there too. Lies that your leaders spread among you to conceal from you the despicable state to which you have descended. Well, you know, gosh, he certainly says some things right, doesn't he? Sinners, of course, he's the same kind of sinner. Huh? All right. Now, the second chapter is about how that they grow. Well, let me read this right here. Statement right here. The Islamic nation is the nation of martyrdom, the nation that desires death more than you desire life. That's to America. And then he kind of finishes up this chapter. He says, the Islamic nation was able to dismiss and destroy the previous evil empires like yourself, the nation that rejects your attacks. Remember, this is the letter from Osama bin Laden in 1998 to America. And they're training people behind him. The nation that rejects your attacks wishes to remove your evils and is prepared to fight you. You are well aware that Islamic nation, from the very core of its being, despises your haughtiness and arrogance. Well, so does God. And God despises all men's arrogance and haughtiness. If the Americans refuse to listen to our advice, this is the end of his letter, and the goodness, guidance, and righteousness to which we call them, then be aware that you will lose this crusade that Bush began, just like the other previous crusades, in which you were humiliated by the hands of mujahideen, fleeing to your homes in great silence and disgrace. If the Americans do not respond, then their fate will be that of the Soviets who fled from Afghanistan to deal with their military defeat, political breakup, ideological downfall, and economic bankruptcy. This is our message to Americans as an answer to their question, do they now know why we fight them over which form of ignorance by the permission of Allah we will be victorious. Now, they have full intentions of coming to America. When I say this, it's so complicated, I can't even begin to go into it. Now, bin Laden has, and it don't matter that he's old, he's training all these people behind him. And it's not just that we went over there looking for weapons of mass destruction. They didn't want anybody to know. Every Arab nation is looking for weapons of mass destruction. When the CIA and the FBI and Homeland Security, of course, Homeland Security was organized due to 9/11, when they briefed the president, they are telling him all that they hear through these underground chatter areas, through all their surveillance systems, and it's phenomenal what they've got and what they can find out. And it's decisions that are made by these think tanks that surround any given president. It's impossible for America to pull out of the Middle East and have peace. It's not impossible to pull out, but it's impossible to pull out. And I'm not trying to take a Republican side. I'm just simply saying from what I study and from how complicated this whole thing is. It is so complex, every one of those Arab nations are trying to secure nuclear power, all of them. Do I doubt that Saddam Hussein wasn't trying to have it? Certainly he was. Whether he moved him out or not, I don't know. But the point is they're all trying, and I'll show you that in a minute. I want to show you what this whole thing's about. In the second chapter, they go through, in this Osama's Revenge, they talk about the Sunnis and the Shiites. He talks about all of these. They have all kinds of lords over here. They have all these, they're like, not unlike the American Indian, that have different tribes, and they got all these warlords that'll rise up in an area, and when they rise up in an area, try to take over a town or city, the Taliban or the Al-Qaeda in that nation will go in like the Lone Ranger or the Durango Kid or Zorro or whatever, you know, and they'll rescue those people, Durango Kid. I don't know why I said and they'll go into that city and they'll liberate it. One of these warlords went in and was trying to annihilate 200,000 people, and Osama bin Laden came out of the mountains like the Lone Ranger and beat him all up and run him off and killed a lot of his people and turned the city back over to the people. Do you think they're going to turn him over to us? And Hezbollah does the same thing. They're trying to rule those people over there and trying to rescue them out of all of their poverty and all of these warlords that rise up and try to overcome them. And they're all trying to develop nuclear power. And there's a man that's been trying to give it to them, and he's given it to Pakistan and to North Korea. And this man says here, Paul Williams says he's the most dangerous man in the world, and it's not Osama bin Laden, it was not Saddam Hussein. He's actually trying to supply, and he is an Arab, and he is a scientist. Well, let me just go over here and tell you about this. Let me show you what's happening. And this is all the arrangement of God, isn't it? This is not... When George Bush went over there, it has to scare a president to death to have those brilliant minds of the CIA and Homeland Security and the FBI gathered around him in the morning and say, Mr. President, we have to do this. This is happening over here, and this is happening over here. And the guy sat there going, I didn't know this was going to be this hard in this job. I wouldn't have taken it. That's why Bill Clinton's hair turned white, and so did George Bush's all the time they were in there. If you'll notice, Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter never hardly say anything bad about George Bush. You know why? They sat in that hot seat and they heard all those things coming in their ears from the CIA and from the... Bill Clinton said they had the chance to kill Saddam Hussein and bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, and they didn't take it. This thing is so complex. I know it's complex by what I read. And so I'm like, that's George Bush's fault. A president, first of all, they want to accuse him of being stupid when he came into the White House. And I'm not trying to defend him. I'm saying, first of all, they want to accuse him of being stupid. Now they think he's smart enough to mess up the whole world. What? I watch those politicians talk and yap, and that's a popularity contest, and they're jealous of somebody who comes along and is popular. Like Sarah Palin. And I'm not for her or against her. Anytime this stuff happens, the American public doesn't know what's going on. When the Soviet Union broke up, the Soviet Union, this is an old map, USSR, Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic. There were 15 states in the Soviet Union. We got 50 states in the United States. They had 15 that made up the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic, and that was organized in 1922. When that broke up in 1991, and Russia became a nation on their own, and Georgia here, and the Ukraine, and all the other states of the Soviet Union broke off, the Soviet Union of states, they had nuclear power, nuclear warheads in all these different states, and they had warehouses where they had these nuclear suitcases and nuclear power. When the Soviet Union broke up, they ended up with 15 states, and some of the states were powered and manned by some little dictator or some little despot. A despot is a dictator. And some little despot began to rule, and he grabbed hold of the nuclear power in the warehouses in his state. Well, what happened, they have what they call the Chechen Mafia. That's the Russian Mafia in New York City. In the Chechen Mafia, there were two men running the Chechen Mafia, and they were dealing back and forth with Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was growing opium fields, and then he was taking the opium, shipping it to the United States, selling it on the streets of New York, and shipping it out through America. And he was selling drugs in America and then going to the Chechen Mafia, which was located in New York City, and buying these nuclear suitcases, taking them over to the Middle East so he could bring them up to date and bomb America with them. He's selling drugs in America so he can buy suitcases from a Russian mafia in America, to take back over there and update his suitcases to come and attack us with. And they said that Mr. Williams says he's supposed to have, they're not sure, but about 20 of them. And they're supposed to keep up those suitcases. But let me read a little bit of this. This is very, very complicated. One man is not doing this. The intricacies are just myriad. It's unbelievable. If you read, I read these books and my head breaks and I'm going, I got to stop this, and I'll go off and just study Bible for a while, and then I'll come back to them going, oh me. It is just complicated. The information about the nuclear suitcases that are meant, remember the nuclear suitcases, they started inventing them. They created them so that they could, they started off, they weighed about 800 pounds. They worked on them, and we have the same thing. We call them David Crockett's and some other name. And they reduced them down to, finally they got them down to about 60 pounds. A man can carry one in his hand, and he says in here, it'll not only blow up the World Trade Center, but half of New York City with one suitcase. The information about the nuclear suitcases that are meant to destroy the United States of America come from Boris M. and Alexei D., two members of the Chechen Mafia from Little Odessa in New York. The two Russians come to the northeastern Pennsylvania to settle a business matter for their boss in Coney Island. I'm just reading, I'm skipping through here, I've got some things outlined. Boris and Alexei reportedly showed up at the headquarters of a capo of the Buffalino clan with Colt anacondas stuffed in their pants. The capo had stiff knees and had never buckled under pressure, not even when the feds placed him in a hot seat over some hits in Philadelphia. But the two Russians, with ice-cold eyes and Richard Widmark routines... Yeah, I thought that's what it was. Gave him a case of the jitters. He dropped his tough guy act and became nice and polite. The two Russians, along with other members of the mafia from the Little Odessa, were also involved in drug trafficking. They dealt most exclusively in heroin that flowed in the United States from the harbor city of Gdansk, Poland. The drugs came to Poland from opium merchants in Turkey who obtained the product from the Helmand and Nangarhar provinces of Afghanistan. And they were selling number 4 heroin, the preferred drug of choice for the American and European markets. And this was so that bin Laden could buy these nuclear suitcases. Let me read to you about this. I've read about them before, but I'm going to read some out of this. I'm trying to inform you what's going on in America. This is not going to be stopped, and this is not a president that's going to start it or stop it. It is a system that is so intricately designed, one man couldn't even understand it. In 1996, David C. and his mafia associates in Chechnya allegedly purchased a shipment of special atomic demolition munitions, or SADAMs, S-A-D-M-S, or nuclear suitcases. That's what they're called. Special atomic demolition munitions, SADMs, nuclear suitcases, from former KGB officials who preferred perestroika, the Russian word for shootout, to perestroika, Mikhail Gorbachev's word for reform. They're going to have a shootout with America. The compact nukes represented the most desirable weapons for customers. Now, if you've got Russian generals getting a hold of these nuclear suitcases and nuclear warheads, and all of it is about trying to attack America or Great Britain and trying to put Israel in the sea, this sounds like Armageddon. It sounds like the 38th chapter of Ezekiel, when all these people of Gog and Magog, which is this upper part of old ancient Mesopotamia, but it is Turkey, Georgia up here, Iran, Iraq, coming down to attack Israel. The compact nukes represented the most desirable weapons for the customers from such countries as Iran, North Korea, and Libya, and representatives of the World Islamic Front who wanted a big bang for their buck. The Chechen Mafia purportedly sold 20 nuclear suitcases in Grozny to representatives of Osama bin Laden and the Mujahideen. For the weapons, bin Laden paid $30 million in cash and 2 tons of heroin that had been... You see, nuclear power is on the market for the highest bidder. And they got more money than anybody in the world over there. They got all the oil. Those sheiks make Bill Gates look like a beggar on the streets. And the 2 tons of heroin that had been refined in his laboratories in Afghanistan, the street value of the heroin was in excess of $700 million. News of the sale was not only conveyed to the U.S. officials by Russia's Federal Security Service, but also leaked to the press. The story appeared August 16, 1998. In 2002, Al-Majala published an update claiming that bin Laden had succeeded in obtaining a total of 48 nuclear suitcases from the Russian mafia over the course of several years. This claim, you say, well, why isn't he bombing us? They play their hand slow, prepare everything. This claim was supported by the reports from Israeli intelligence that al-Qaeda agents purchased 12 to 15 kilos of uranium-235 6 months before September 11th from Simeon Moglevich, a shadowy Ukrainian-born Jew who rules over a vast crime empire of arms trafficking, money laundering, drug running, and white slavery for additional nukes. Mogilevich reportedly collected more than $75 million from bin Laden and his associates. The nuclear suitcases were originally designed to serve as tactical rather than strategic weapons for use against NATO targets in the time of war. They were not really suitcases, but suitcase-sized nuclear devices. That's a picture of one of them right there. These guys, you think this guy's making this up? No. The thing is so complicated. Nuclear power is available in the world. You've got the money. That's all it takes. Bin Laden's got the money, and he's got the connections to get the money. Do I believe that Saddam Hussein had intentions of weapons of mass destruction? Certainly did. They all do. They want to attack America, Israel, Great Britain, and get us for taking that land away from their Palestinian brothers. They would come kill me even though I think America's crazy, simply because I'm an American. Doesn't matter. They would kill everybody. They were not really suitcases, but suitcase-sized nuclear devices which could be fired from grenade or rocket launchers or detonated in public buildings, shopping malls, arenas, or stadiums for sporting events. One weapon placed in the center of a major metropolitan area was capable of instantly killing several 100,000 civilians while exposing millions of others to lethal gamma rays. Some of these weapons were smuggled in the United States by Soviet agents and buried at scattered remote locations. They're buried here now. There is no doubt that the Soviets, maybe this will scare you to make you realize Armageddon is coming. It ain't got nothing to do with, I mean, it's so shallow to say, there wasn't weapons of mass destruction. It don't even matter whether they're trying to get them all over the Middle East. And you got a bunch of Russian generals that grabbed hold, and a bunch of dictators who grabbed hold of all of those. Nobody even knows. He goes on to say, nobody even knows where all those weapons went. They just disappeared, and they appeared on the national market for the highest bidder. And the Russian mafia in New York City was selling a lot of them. There's no doubt that the Soviets stored material, including nuclear suitcases, in this country. Kurt Weldon, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee on Military Research and Development, said, the question is, what and where? What did they bury and where did they bury it? In attempting to verify the reports of the buried nukes, FBI Director Louis Freeh ordered a team of nuclear technicians to excavate several areas around Brainerd, Minnesota, where Soviet spies were believed to have forward deployed several suitcases in case of war. Diggings began at additional sites after KGB defector Vasily Mitrokhin served as a chief archivist for the agency, informed British intelligence that secret stockpiles of tactical nuclear devices were buried in upstate New York, California, Texas, and Minnesota. When I'm talking to y'all about this, I don't even know how to explain this other than read it to you. I don't even know how to explain to people the complexities of the nuclear situation in the Middle East. This ain't George Bush going into, hey, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction, WMD, they didn't have it's real shallow. Well, it doesn't even matter whether they had them or not. They're going to get them all over the Middle East before it's over with. And when they get them in Iran, they're attacking Israel with nuclear power unless we go to war against Iran first. You say, what does this have to do with the Bible? It has to do with prophecy to Israel falling by the sword. And when this great attack is mounted against Israel, in Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, all these ancient nations are going to come and attack Israel that has come back from the sword. And Israel did not come back from the sword until 1948. It sounds like this is about what to happen, doesn't it? Folks, we need to get on our faces. Quit looking and blaming some man. God's orchestrated this. Diggings began in additional sites after KGB defector Vasily. They started in Minnesota, New York, Texas, and California. Mitrokhin's information was supported by Colonel Stanislav Lunev, the highest-ranking military spy to defect from the Soviet Union, and the leading confidential source on Russia's nuclear arsenal, Lunev told a congressional committee in January 2000 that nuclear suitcases had indeed been buried in the United States, although he could not pinpoint the exact locations. Now, they do have to keep the uranium updated, and that's all they have to do is update it. I don't know if it's a real complicated situation, but they got scientists that can do that. Such information remains secret, Lunev said, because Russian military leaders continue to believe that a nuclear conflict between Russia and the United States remains inevitable. It's going to happen. He concluded, we're going to see nuclear, we're going to see. You know why they won't let people read these guys come on and read out of these books or tell you what's in it? It would cause a panic. It might cause some people to get real nervous when I play this on TV. But see, America's asleep, and they have to control what they say when they go on those TV shows because they don't want to cause a pandemic situation, do they? He concluded his testimony by saying, just now what we are talking about, location of technical nuclear devices, these places we have selected extremely carefully for a long period of time, and to believe it is possible to find these places just like that without using extremely large resources of the country. I don't think that it would be realistic until Russian government, which still has the keys to these locations, will disclose their locations. The number of weapons buried in the United States and Europe remains anyone's guess. But Soviet scientists produced more than 700 nuclear suitcases during the 1960s and 70s, and hundreds more during the 1980s. The first SADMs were very expensive to maintain and too heavy for practical use. They had to be carried in crates that measured 4 feet by 2.5 feet with a weight that exceeded 800 pounds. I said that before. During the 1970s, the weapons were streamlined so they could be transported in cases measuring 2 feet by 1.5 feet with a weight of 320 pounds. These modified nukes consisted of 3 coffee can-sized aluminum canisters that had to be connected with a crew of 5, a commander, a radio officer, and 3 American technicians before detonation. The bombs were carried in green canvas cases with pockets on the side. The detonator was about 6 inches long and was carried in a knife-like sheath. Each weapon could produce an explosive yield of 1 kiloton, enough to topple not only the Twin Towers, but also much of lower Manhattan. Throughout the Cold War, the United States developed similar small nukes that became known as rucksack bombs or Davy Crockett's. In 1966, the Department of Defense made a training film that showed how the Saddams could be stuffed into parachutes of commandos and attached to the diving gear of a Navy SEALs. The film also demonstrated how the small weapons could be affixed to buildings, bridges, and ships. Does this make anybody nervous? See, I don't know what to do. What I'm doing, this is what the Middle East is about. It's with George Bush and the WMDs. It's so much more than that. It's not some little one story on one little nation over there in the Middle East. I'll say this. I'm not for Bush, but he's getting a bad rap on that. Because he's not capable of doing what they're accusing him of doing. Ain't nobody that smart. This thing is a complication of brilliant minds throughout the Arab world and throughout the Russian world. Is this boring? Huh? I just want to read it to you. This is so complicated, I can't say these things without reading them. You understand that? I'd have to memorize the book. The film also demonstrated how the small weapons could be affixed to buildings, bridges, and ships detonated by a team of highly trained military personnel. During the 1980s, Soviet and U.S. nuclear technicians respectively made refinements until the weapons came to measure 24 inches by 16 inches by 8 inches with a weight of less than 60 pounds. A nuclear warhead that can blow up Manhattan. You can carry it in a suitcase into a stadium and blow up the Cowboys playing the Patriots. Boy, that would be something, wouldn't it? Much as they love the World Series and the Super Bowl, blow that up, and boy, that would make everybody a nervous wreck, wouldn't it? A single agent could now transport the device from place to place in a suitcase to cause a significant event, put the event in quotations. Each small suitcase contained at least 1 kiloton of fissionable plutonium and uranium. The plutonium and uranium were kept in separate compartments and connected to a triggering mechanism that could be activated by a clock or called from a cell phone. You know what this sounds like? The CIA headquarters is at Langley Air Force Base. I sang there several times when I was in the music business. It sounds like classified material at Langley, doesn't it? You go down here at the Books of Million and buy it. But you know why America doesn't know about this? They're busy buying Tony Robbins out in front. He's on the display, and these are just back there in the political section. Nobody cares about this, and this is what is important. We're living in a... They want to get rich while the tribulation is coming, you know. Gets rich before the bomb goes off, you know, and then blow up all your money. The plutonium and uranium were kept in separate compartments and connected to a triggering device. Listen, the plutonium and uranium were kept in a separate compartment of these less than 60 pound suitcases and connected to a triggering mechanism that could be activated by a clock or a call from a cell phone. Set it down, walk out, go 10 miles away, call it on the phone. Boom, there goes this building. Huh? It sounds like fiction, doesn't it? It's not.
Same thing is going on.
That's because America is asleep and blind, and they're willingly there. I've been saying this is going to happen for years. How long have y'all heard me, the ones that's been coming here for years, heard me say America's got to go down and the economy has to collapse? I've been saying that for 20 years in this ministry. The small Soviet nukes, however, lacked the safety systems to prevent unauthorized use. To rectify this problem, the weapons were equipped with electronic combination locks that could be opened and operated only by Spetsnaz, Soviet Special Forces personnel. As added security, they were placed under the care of the 9th Directorate of the KGB, a unit responsible for executive protection rather than the Ministry of Defense. Now, these warehouses and these caches of nuclear weapons, he goes on to say they don't even know where they all are that the Soviets had. Because the Soviets was one system of states, and when they broke up into those little individual states, and many of those little dictators put these things on the international market for whoever wanted them. For this reason, the weapons never appeared on the list of the Soviet nuclear arsenal. Few in the United States, including ambassadors engaged in disarmament talks with the Russian officials, knew of their existence. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russian army units, tired of polishing their ICBMs and rotating their nuclear weapons, decided to manifest the new spirit of capitalism by stripping the weapons down into economically attractive parcels and selling them to the highest bidder. They went on the national market. So what's funny is you can go to France or England when they have one of them air shows. Arabs will be there, Americans will be there, people from every nation in the world, and they'll be over there demonstrating their jets, and you go out there and put a bid on them and buy one for $100 million or whatever. They're buying them. Mary and I fostered a boy for about a year. He's about Eric's age. He's 14, 15. And strange kid. He grew up. I was teaching him how to lift weights. He got real big. And then he went into the military, connected with a guy, learned about arms, and now he's an arms dealer. I saw a mutual acquaintance, a doctor. I see him from time to time, and I said, "You see Frank?" He said, "Oh, he's dealing arms still." I said, "Where does he sell arms?" He said, "Everywhere in the world." Sells them to Arabs, to Americans, to French, to Russians, whoever wants to buy them. He's making a ton of money. It's about love of money. That's what it's about. You know, the guys selling them don't care if they get blowed up as long as they can get some money right now. I'll enjoy it real quick or something, I guess. By 1993, over 6,430 reports of stolen weapons ranging from assault rifles to tanks were filed by the Russian Defense Ministry. 6,430 reports of stolen weapons. By 1998, the ministry received more than 700 reports of nuclear material being sold to various buyers within and outside of Mother Russia. Many Russian army officers were becoming incredibly rich. I wonder how. Taking this stuff out of their arsenals. On the black market, a kilo of chromium-50 sold for $25,000. Cesium-137 for $1 million, and lithium for $10 million, all of which are needed to build nuclear weapons. Former members of the KGB, which have been replaced by the FSB, also took part in the sale of goodies from the Soviet arsenal. These agents could provide buyers with some of the most highly prized items, including the nuclear suitcases. Russia transformed itself from a superpower to a third world nation in less than 6 years. Such technology, that's when they collapsed in 1991. Such technology was becoming readily available. By 1996, more than 3,000 unpaid and disillusioned Russian scientists with expertise in the construction and maintenance of weapons of mass destruction left the country. Do you think that bin Laden and Saddam Hussein were not on the market for those? Oh, you know they were. Let me read that again. In 1996, more than 3,000 unpaid and disillusioned Russian scientists, more than 3,000 disillusioned Russian scientists with expertise in construction and maintenance of weapons of mass destruction left their country and went to whoever gave them the most money. We're sitting on a powder keg, a time bomb in the world. Armageddon's truly going to be Armageddon, isn't it? Some went to North Korea. Oh, North Korea? What's his face? Others obtained lucrative employment with Al-Qaeda. These are Russian scientists. Others, Muslim terrorist groups. By 1996, the likelihood of a nuclear device exploding in America increased to a red alert level, the highest since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Concern about the nuclear suitcases first arose in 1994 when Zokhar Dudayev, I heard one of the candidates mention the nuclear suitcases the other day. Did anybody hear that? One of them, I can't remember. I was meant to write it down. Huh? Did you hear it? I heard one of them mention the nuclear suitcase. I thought, hey, there it is. You know about it. The leader of the Chechen separatists, this Russian, notified the U.S. State Department that he possessed tactical nuclear suitcases. Didyev said that he was willing to sell to hostile countries or to groups if the United States failed to recognize Kachinka's independence. His claim was granted credence by the officials of the National Intelligence Council, an umbrella organization of the U.S. analytical community. The reason I'm reading this to y'all, I want you to see how complicated the Middle East is. This ain't just us invading. Katie Couric, why don't you read more than what you read? You might want to go on the news and say more that they'll stop you from saying. What do you read about the Middle East? That's just so stupid to say, what kind of books you read? What newspapers you read? What do you read? The officials told a congressional committee that there were at least 4 occasions between 1992 and 1996 when the weapons grade and weapons usable nuclear materials, including Saddam's, had been stolen from Soviet stockpiles. Of these thefts, the officials said, we assess that undetected smuggling has occurred, although we do not know the extent of the magnitude. I'm just about at the end of this chapter. I'm reading just about a whole chapter to you. This is the introduction. The Chechen Mafia negotiated the sale of suitcases to representatives of Osama bin Laden. It was an amicable deal between Muslims. Bin Laden got the weapons to destroy the great Satan, the United States, and the Chechens got the cash to drive away the Russian bear. And I like what Mr. Walid Ferez said. He said, where do you hide from a great big dragon? You hide from him inside the dragon's belly. And that's where Hezbollah is, and Al-Qaeda, and Taliban. They're here in America now. They're inside the belly. We're the great big dragon, and they're hiding inside of us. They're here. They're here. Huh? They have been here. That's right, for a long time. They're buying up everything in America. You say, Jim, what's the answer? Get on your face before God and repent. He's going to have the last word, and Jesus is coming back to rescue his people, us. Isn't he? Hope y'all don't mind me reading this. It's kind of hair-raising stuff. I know you won't go by the book, and I've got the sections underlined that I wanted to underline them a long time ago. Put stars by them. I make sure I tell them this. The Chechen Mafia negotiated the sale of suitcases to Osama bin Laden. The Chechens got the cash to drive away the Russian bear. In addition to the cadre of Russian scientists, bin Laden recruited former Spetsnaz troops to work on the project of preparing the delivery of suitcases to the major cities in Europe and the United States. To simplify the process of activation, the technicians and scientists came up with a way of hot wiring the bombs to the bodies of Muslim soldiers who longed for immediate martyrdom and elevation to the seventh heaven. They're going to send one over here with a bomb on him. And how hard do you think it is to get across the Mexican border? How hard do you think it is to get across the Canadian border? It's easy. I mean, the Canadian border, it's miles between their guard posts. Miles. We'll just walk across.
Got to fly below radar.
Well, they can walk across. Put a strap on, walk across, have a car pick them up here in America, and drive to the nearest whatever and blow it up. In 1998, Alexander Lebed, the former Russian security secretary under Boris Yeltsin, met in a closed-door session with members of the U.S. House of Representatives and admitted that 40 nuclear suitcases had disappeared from the Russian arsenal and could be in the hands of Muslim extremists. Lebed said that he was able to confirm the production of 132 suitcases and could account for only 48. When asked the whereabouts of the other 84 suitcases, Lebed replied, I have no idea. They're somewhere out there in the world that somebody's got them. He went on to testify that he did not know how many suitcases had been produced throughout the Cold War, but said that the later models of the small atomic demolition munitions were ideal weapons for nuclear terror. And maybe my doctor has read some of this, because even my cardiologist said, I believe we will see nuclear explosions in America. I believe it's going to happen. If you think they're backing off, they're not. And giving George Bush the credit for starting something over weapons of mass destruction, that's being very small talk. That's small potatoes. One man, they can't have credit for that. It takes all of these complex situations. Lebed's testimony was later corroborated by Vladimir Denisov, a former member of the Russian Security Council, by Alexei Yablokov, environment advisor to Russian President Boris Yeltsin. Denisov told a U.S. Congressional committee that he had received numerous reports that the missing nukes had been obtained by the Chechen separatist. Yablokov testified that over 700 suitcases had been produced exclusively for the KGB for this reason. He explained the nuclear suitcases did not appear on the official inventory of Russia's nuclear weapons. He added that the small nukes would have required 2 major overhauls in the 20 or so years since they had been manufactured, and did not know if such overhauls had been conducted. So they need to be overhauled. And you got all these Russian scientists that have disappeared all over the world, and they know how to do it. The weapons that Lebed described, according to the physicist Carrie Sublett of the Nuclear Weapon Archive, are based on a nuclear design concept called linear implosion. This concept is that an elongated, football-shaped, lower-density, subcritical mass of material can be compressed and conformed into a critical, higher-density, spherical configuration by embedding it in a cylinder of explosives that are initiated at each end. You know what I believe? I believe George Bush is going to be glad to get out of that seat. If y'all notice, he's very quiet. Got his head down. It's like, boy, I've been whipped. I believe the presidency of the United States, you sat there for 4 years and you feel like you are whipped. Why would anybody would want it, I don't know. The device would be capable, now here it is. This device, nuclear suitcase, would be capable of producing an explosive yield of 10 kilotons, enough to wipe away much of New York City if the fusion was boosted by a thin beryllium reflector with a thickness no greater than the core radius. Sublett believes that the weapons could be further refined to fit into an attaché case. They're getting it down, aren't they? Whew. In 1998, Yosif Bodansky, I'm wondering, will somebody call me on this? Will I get some call from some FBI or somebody saying, you don't need to be reading that? Well, you can buy it down here at Books A Million. I was just thinking of that while I was reading this. In 1998, Yosif Bodansky, head of the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism and Unconventional Warfare in Washington, D.C., told a congressional committee, there is no longer much doubt that bin Laden has succeeded in a quest for nuclear suicide bombs. He told He told the committee that the bombs had been transported through Pakistan to various al-Qaeda cells. The Russians believe bin Laden, has a handful of nuclear weapons. I'm right about the end. I've nearly read to you all this chapter. Saudi intelligence services are very conservative. Perhaps they are friendly to the United States. How much time do I have?
14.
I'm reading this. I just want to read this chapter to you. Let you know what's going on in the Middle East. This is not something one man has done. This is something the whole world has done, and God has orchestrated their minds. Perhaps they are friendly to the United States, believe that he has the neighborhood of 20. As far as the acquisition and obtaining of such weapons, there's the multiple sources of that dealing with the actual purchases of the suitcase bombs. bin Laden, has a collection of individuals knowledgeable in activating the bombs. They can activate them. They can update them. And looking for and recruiting former Soviet special forces and learning how to operate the bombs behind enemy lines. And even Donald Rumsfeld in this book acknowledges that he knew about them. And one of the candidates talked about him the other day. May have been Obama, I don't know. Asked about the immediacy of the threat, Bodansky said, we don't have any indication that they're going to use it, the nuclear arsenal, tomorrow or any other day, but they have the capacity. Even bin Laden is going to be leery of that because Israel has got their finger on, a hair trigger on all of their arsenals, and they got thousands of these nuclear warheads aimed all over the Middle East. Do y'all think this is going to go away in the next 30 or 40 years? No. We have to be close to the end of all things, don't we? This is a battle between Ishmael and Isaac, between Jacob and Esau. That's what it's about. It's about that land. Armageddon is mounting. So one does not go into a tremendous amount of expenditures, effort, investment in human beings and human resources to have something that will be kept in storage for a rainy day. Word also came straight from the horse's mouth. Listen to this. To inform the world of his possession of weapons, bin Laden issued a statement called The Nuclear Bombs of Islam, in which he said, it is the duty of Muslims to prepare as much force as possible to terrorize the enemies of God, speaking of Allah. In December 1999 interview with a journalist from Time magazine, he let it be known in an oblique way that he had secured nuclear weapons. Acquiring weapons For the defense of Muslims is a religious duty, he said. If I have indeed acquired these weapons, then I thank God for enabling me to do so. Well, when he dies, he's going to pass them to all these guys he's training. And the guy that was his second in command that was killed here last year, what was his name? Yeah, I can't remember how you pronounce it. Lahari or... Well, anyway. Several weeks later, when asked by ABC News if he was seeking to obtain chemical and nuclear weapons, bin Laden said, if I seek to acquire such weapons, this is a religious duty. How we use them is up to us. In an interview with Hamid Mir in November 2001, bin Laden was even more explicit. We have chemical and nuclear weapons. He told the Pakistani editor, if America uses chemical and nuclear weapons against us, then we may retort with chemical and nuclear weapons. They're not going to do this all of a sudden. They're going to wait till the right time. They know if they explode nuclear power on us, we'll go back on them. So they're just as smart as we are. Nobody's really ready for the great war except Ahmadinejad. If he gets the power, and you can believe it, he's negotiating with these other nations around him. And they are working on it. Benjamin Netanyahu, and this is all prophecy, folks, isn't it? He says, when Mir asked the Muslim imam where he obtained such weapons, bin Laden said, go on to the next question. I'm not answering that. Bin Laden told Mir that it was relatively easy for Al-Qaeda to obtain nuclear weapons. If Al-Qaeda could, so could Saddam Hussein. They're arming in the Middle East. The same man that armed North Korea armed Pakistan. Considered to be the most dangerous man in the world. It wasn't anybody I've mentioned. It is not difficult, not if you have contacts in Russia and with other militant groups. They are available for 10 million or 20 million. That's pennies to them with their own money. In this stage in the interview, Ayman al-Zawahiri, bin Laden's chief strategist, that was the guy that was killed, interjected, if you go to BBC reports, you will find that 30 nuclear weapons are missing from Russia's nuclear arsenal. Al-Zawahiri, that was that guy, added, we have links with Russia's underworld channels. But Boris and Alexei, who are Muslims, these guys that head the Chechen Mafia, or the Russian Mafia in New York, and who speak the language of Chechens, remain unconcerned about the plans and schemes of bin Laden and the Mujahideen as they continue to enjoy the good life in America. We're going to enjoy it now. We're selling these weapons and we don't care. I got me a new Cadillac and a new suit of clothes. While going after their business of selling stolen cars and choice heroin from Afghanistan, they are well aware of the transaction that might cause the next 9/11. We love the USA, Boris says. Oh, sure you do. He is behind the wheel of a stolen BMW with several not Cadillac, BMW, with several plastic bags of choice heroin in the glove compartment and shipment of Uzis, AK-47s, and other weapons, including landmines, in the trunk. It is Labor Day weekend. The traffic on Route 80 between New York City and Scranton, Pennsylvania is heavy. In the back seat, Alexei takes a slug of Stoli and chants, USA, USA. These are the two guys that's selling the nuclear bombs. Boris takes a drag of his Marlboro, flashes his yellow teeth, and breaks into his best Richard Widmark imitation. Alexei joins in. They continue to emit the forced laughter from several minutes until their voices seem to meld into a howl. I'm just going to read a little bit off of the page in the next chapter. Just a little bit. This is the only way I know to tell you what's in these books, because I haven't had anybody tell me they're going to try to buy these. I don't expect you to. I don't expect you to sit down and pour over them like I do, because I really go into them and go, goodness gracious, boy, we are headed for major world problems. And this is the fight between the Jews and the Arabs over that land, over the land of Israel that was given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's all it's about. In 1998, Pakistan officially joined the elite nuclear club of nations, along with the United States, Russia, China, Great Britain, France, India, and Israel, by successfully testing 5 atomic bombs beneath the scorched hill of the Baluchistan desert. Military experts throughout the world were shocked to the quick by the demonstration of technology from a third world country that had failed to develop an adequate sanitation system for its major cities. Couldn't develop a sanitation system, but they can get nuclear power. The remarkable technology achievement was accomplished largely through the efforts of one individual, Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan, a Pakistani scientist and Islamic extremist. Dr. Khan, who went on to work on the successful test firing of the nuclear-capable Gandhi 1 and 2 missiles, is a national hero in Pakistan, where his birthday is sanctified in mosque. He is the only Pakistani to have received the highest civilian award of Nishan-e-Imtiaz twice, in 1996 and 98. His stature is so elevated and protected by the Pakistani government, writes Dr. Rajesh Kumar Mishra of the South Asian Analysis Group, that he has been epitomized as larger than the nuclear image of Pakistan. Anything said or done against this scientist is considered to be anti-Pakistan, anti-Islam, and intolerable. In the United States and Europe, however, Dr. Khan is viewed as a rogue scientist, a nuclear madman, an individual far more dangerous than Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein. If the international community had a proliferation most wanted list, Abdul Qadir Khan would be the most wanted on the list, the most dangerous man in the world, because he has negotiated all the nuclear power for North Korea, Pakistan. You understand what I'm saying? This is so complex. When I hear somebody say, George Bush did this and he went over and no weapons of mass destruction. Oh gosh, that's a stupid statement. Get off that subject. You don't even know what's going on. That's what's so stupid. The whole world's about to fall down around our ears and we want to blame one man for all of this. George Bush ain't that smart. Nobody's that smart. You mean to negotiate all this stuff that's going on? He don't have nothing to do with this. He's just a puppet. That's all the presidents are. They're just a figurehead there for the great minds of the world. Said Robert J. Eichhorn, Assistant Secretary of State for the... Listen to this. Let me read this again. If the international community had a proliferation most wanted list, A.Q. Khan, Abdul Qadir Khan, would be the most wanted on the list, said Robert J. Einhorn, Assistant Secretary of State for the Clinton administration. He's one of Clinton's people that said he was the most dangerous man alive. I'm out of time, man. About 3 minutes. It goes into how he began his career, how he's got a scientific school over there. I mean, do y'all realize how complex that is? I try to read these books on the FBI and the CIA, and I'm going to get one on Homeland Security, and they actually sell this stuff at Barnes & Noble, and these are brilliant minds that write these, guys that go into covert activities, and some of them worked for the FBI and CIA, worked overseas, had their lives in jeopardy, and correlated all this information over the years, and it's so complicated and complex that every one of these nations wants nuclear power so they can attack Israel. And Ahmadinejad has got guts enough to say it. And that looks like Armageddon, because that looks like the 38th chapter of Ezekiel when they're going... Look at that one more time. I won't take time to read any more of this. I'll go into Mr. Kahan next week. I just want to read... Y'all mind if I read some of this stuff to you? I know I had to get... Huh? I don't even know how to express it to you. I can't say it in a few sentences when I'm teaching on prophecy. Do y'all understand that? I'm saying, how can I tell the people this? And I got to thinking earlier, I'll read something to them out of this. And these guys are not making this stuff up. This is awful big stories for them to make it up, isn't it? Besides that, you hear one of the presidential candidates mention the nuclear suitcases, and then I think I've got a quote in here by, huh? Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, what's so strange, it's out there. He's got an article in here where, let me see if I can find it, where, let me see here. Well, it's one of the chapters. He's got, let me see if I can find it. I'm flipping through. If I'd known I was going to read out of this. I have not known how to explain this to y'all, how complicated it is. The complications in the Middle East are so intricately. The covert activities, the James Bond stuff goes on there every day. Except the good guy don't always get away. A lot of times he gets killed. Got double agents everywhere. It's just, I mean, reading that FBI and CIA books, I'm going, phew. We are living in the most complex world, and America is one of the most evil systems it's ever been. It's proud and lifted up and has a form of God, and it denies the power of God. He's got a letter in here that just a little, it's a quote from, what's his name? The Secretary of Defense used to be Donald Rumsfeld. He quotes Rumsfeld talking about the suitcases. And Rumsfeld, oh, here it is. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. Well, Senator, first. Well, he reads Senator James Inhofe, Republican, Oklahoma. I do agree about the threat, the terrorist threat that's here, the suitcases. No one from Oklahoma has to be told what that threat is and the devastation of the Murrah Federal Office building, talking about the blow-up of the federal building in Oklahoma City, was the explosive power of 1 ton of TNT. The smallest nuclear warhead we really heard about is about a kiloton, 1,000 times that destruction. So I would hope we do not get ourselves into the position of saying we are either going to guard against terrorist attacks carrying suitcases or ICBMs, but not both. We need to have adequate protection against both of them. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, well, Senator, first, let me say that I agree completely with you on the variety of the weapons of mass destruction and that it's important that we address the spectrum of them and not one and ignore the others. He was saying, yes, I agree, they're out there. This is not some secret thing. We're headed down the road. And when you read the first part of that 38th chapter of Ezekiel, and I brought it out before, I don't know if people will like this. I read this on TV. I've been looking for a way to stir people up. Maybe that'll do it. You reckon? Somebody will come shoot me. I get to go be with the Lord. And you know what's caused all this? False doctrine. Bell and Grove was false doctrine. That's all it is. What's caused it? Billy Graham is the guy that caused it. He teaches false doctrine, doesn't he? Yeah. And Charles Stanley preaches false doctrine. Their doctrine has caused this. You preach false doctrine, God says, I'll bring devastation, I'll put you in derision, I'll laugh at your calamity, and I'll do it, and there'll be no answer.
See, and they all give us a false sense of everything's all right. That's why people don't want to hear the contrary.
When you read this stuff, this is hair-raising, folks. I mean, I just gave you a little bit. I gave you one chapter out of a book. One chapter. Reading these guys, and the racks are full of this stuff down there at the Books A Million and Barnes & Noble. You go in there and look at the titles, you're going to think, oh, God, this scares the life out of me. Oh, look at that. Oh, I'm going, oh, wow, I got to get this. And it's got some, when America falls and dies, or something like that, But when you go to the 38th chapter, he's talking about Gog and Magog. That's up here. Attacks Israel. And he says, I'll just read this. I'm out of time, but I'll read it. And God says, I will bring forth in all thine army horses and horsemen. Of course, he couldn't put tanks in there. There wasn't any tanks then. He's talking about an army back then. All them that are clothed with all sorts of armor, even great company with bucklers and shields, with all them handling swords. Persia, that's Iran. Ethiopia, down here by Egypt. Libya, right there. Libya, attacking Israel. With them all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and the house of Togarmah. Gomer's right up here. That's here. Togarmah's right down here in Turkey and Syria. This is the ancient names of the descendants of Ham in the 10th chapter of Genesis, which is the table of nations. That's what they were called back then. Togarmah. And of the north quarters and all his bands and many people with him. But look down here in verse 8. And many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword. Never has Israel been brought back from the sword in their history and then attacked by these nations. That's never happened before. They've been brought back from the sword May 14, 1948. But never. They have not ever been brought back from the sword, period. They've been attacked by one of these nations. They've been attacked by Assyria, but they weren't brought back from the sword. They were taken by the sword when Assyria attacked them. This is Israel after having been brought back from the sword, after having fallen for 2,600 years. Then they're going to be attacked. Well, they're not going to be attacked with horses. They're going to be attacked with only God knows what. I am not apologizing. I just hope some people, I've heard Baptist preachers, they need to read out of the Bible. Well, you don't even read nothing the rest of the time. I can do what I want to. Shut up. I don't read out of any other thing besides these preachers read out of newspapers and other books other than the Bible. That's an imbecile that says that. This is about the end of times, what it's about. I hope you kind of get a hold of a little bit of this. This Abdul Qadir Khan, he is the cause of nuclear power. Do you think he wasn't going to deal with Saddam Hussein? But we caught him. Oh, by the way, we caught Abdul Qadir Khan, and he's in American custody. But all of his scientists are not, and all these 3,000 Russian scientists aren't, and they're still dealing. And he's the guy that sold the centrifuge system to North Korea and to Pakistan to build their nuclear warheads.
He's in White House arrest in Pakistan.
Yeah, we've got. Yeah, well, he is still in charge. That's the point. He's still the boss. And he is the most dangerous man in the world. Saddam Hussein is just one little guy. Was one little guy. And so was Osama bin Laden. This thing is so complicated. That's why I've read about this and talked to you about it tonight. Listen to these people say stuff. And George Bush couldn't get us in this kind of trouble. He don't even know how. Neither could Bill Clinton. A president can't get you in this kind of trouble. What gets you in trouble, it's the same thing that's gotten us into this $700 billion bailout. It's a bunch of money moguls in the world. That's what it's about. The guys that run the world, when the president wants to know what's going on in the industrial and financial world, he don't call a lawyer. He calls H. Ross Perot. He calls Donald Trump. That's who those guys converse with. He calls the president of Union Carbide or General Motors or Lee Iacocca. Those guys are geniuses and brilliant minds. They don't know what's in the financial system. They don't call in the senator from Oklahoma. They call them in on Wall Street. It's like I said, what we need for a president is a guy who runs a corporation. We need somebody like Lee Iacocca, who pulled Chrysler out of the dumps in the early 80s and actually made it one of the top car companies, and they were bankrupting. They said, we'll bring in Lee Iacocca, and he's a genius. He came up with the Mustang and boy, it rejuvenated Ford like unbelievable. But why would Lee Iacocca give up $27 million a year salary for $300,000? He's not. Those are the brains. Is the money moguls, and they're the guys that got us in this trouble. Ain't no president got us in it. Ain't no president going to get us out of it. It's God that arranged their minds and their lives. America has to go down. Isn't that funny? It's funny to me, lawyers run for president. Most of those guys are lawyers. That's comical to me. You don't get a lawyer to be a president of the largest corporation in the world, which is the United States of America. You get a corporation head. Boy, we don't have good sense, do we? I hope this is informative to you. I've been wanting to say some of these things. I've read to you out of this book before, but I never read a whole chapter to you so it can sober you. And I'll come back and read some more. I just really want to cover some of this material. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for your truth. God, we pray that you'll strengthen us for what's coming. God, I believe with all my heart that the end of all things is around the corner. It may not be in my life, but Lord, it could be. I pray you'll give your people the strength to stand. Lord, cause us to get into the Word, bow to your will. And the only answer is on our faces before you, because we're not to fear him that can destroy our bodies, but to fear you that can destroy both soul and body in hell. We pray, Lord, that you'll cause us to continue this work. Let me help unravel these as much as I can, Lord. I'm such a little, small, nobody person. And I want to unravel the truths to your elect so they can see what's coming, so they can be prepared when it comes. And I feel like I'm so insignificant in this world of confusion. If you'll give me the ability to say these things in the avenue, Lord, I'll say it. You know that. You've given me that boldness. Open up the door for this ministry through TV throughout the country, and God will continue to give you the praise and glory for all things. In Christ's name we pray, amen. It was a political lesson. I don't believe any of those guys.
This thing from Donnelly and
I don't know. I hadn't even read it.
Laura Bagby.
I hadn't even read it, Mary. Let me read
Gave
it.
it to me.
Well, let me read it before you throw it away. Hey, what are you doing? How you doing? How you doing, Rusty?
Get out of here.
Okay. Well, more history lesson, more current events lesson tonight.